big week, manifesto week, isn't it?
It is.
And you just explain for viewers why they will see a difference this week to every other week when parties say, this is our policy on this and this is our policy on that.
So this will be months or perhaps only weeks of work, documents, policies, costed, detailed. We can go through it line by line, analyse it. Each party will do it, and it's a really important part. I think Labour are going first, I think. Oh, no, Lib Dems
Thursday,
first.
Lib Dems today.
And it's a huge moment because we will see, were the Tories prepared? Were Labour prepared for an early election? And will there be any surprises? Because the Tories have come up with quite a lot. Labour have come up with very little. So is the manifesto going to be threadbare? Be interesting.
Until
it's the
now,
opposite of how it normally is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, until now we've really had parties saying that party will do that to you, and it'll be terrible. Well, let's actually see what you're going to do to improve people's lives, make them better, or worse. But what are you going to do?
And the Conservatives are going to hope that it means people turn their attention away from what Rishi Sunak did at the D-Day commemorations. I have never known a general election so torpedoed by a governing party doing such an own goal,
I suspect,
shooting themselves in the foot.
I suspect when we write Rishi Sunak's political epitaph and the history of this campaign, it will be the defining moment. It was an astonishing decision to leave the D-Day celebrations early. I can't fathom it. People say blame his advisers. Well, his advisers are hopeless for allowing it, but his instincts were so out of kilter. He should have... Why did he want to leave early? Why would you not want to be there? And now we know it wasn't to come back, actually, for a pre-recorded interview with ITV. It's actually for a 6 p.m. meeting to sign off the manifesto, which we're going to get this week. You could have signed that off any time. It was a terrible blunder, and his apology was cringe-making too.
I still can't get my head around it because, right, there's an election war, but there was a real war, and this is 80 years on.
And Britain was a big part of it.
Britain,
we led it.
The US, Canada, D-Day, biggest seaborne invasion in history, 150,000 people, many of them killed, didn't return. Very dwindling band left who have incredible dignity, and you look at them and you hear them and you feel teary. You feel immense pride, but you feel teary at what they endured. They think of their comrades who didn't return. Why would you abandon them on the beaches to go back and sign off a manifesto? Go back to a political war, an election war, but abandon the survivors and heroes of a real war. It is.
It is
inexplicable.
But also, David Cameron was there. The Foreign Secretary stood in for the Prime Minister.
So then we had the photo shoots where you have the US President, the German Chancellor, the French President, and our Foreign Secretary. Not our Prime Minister.
At one point, it seemed they were going to send the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. So it's not as if they stumbled into this. But why didn't Cameron, our diplomat-in-chief as Foreign Secretary, say, hang on, Prime Minister, this is an extra...
He claims he did.
Well, he claims he did. Or did he want to be there to burnish his credentials?
Sunday Times says he was apoplectic.
Well, there's a limit to what I can do, is how
he should have said. If he'd said, I'm not going to stand in for you, Prime Minister, the Prime Minister would have had to have stayed.
But the point you make, which is that if they had thought Grant Shapps would be OK, the Defence Secretary, and then thought, no, that isn't good enough, let's ask David Cameron, they obviously knew there was an issue. The thing which is kind of striking here to me, you know, we talk about election campaigns, about the leaders and, you know, the campaign gurus and the intellects and the policies, but there's also this army of people whose job is to make sure that you don't have terrible gaffes, that the pictures are right, the whole thing works smoothly. And we've had, you know, first of all, the launch of the election in the pouring rain.
Drowning.
Then we had the photo opportunity with the Titanic in the background. And then on the aeroplane with Rishi Sunak and the exit signs. And the truth is, in a campaign, there's people whose job it is to make sure you avoid these errors, to get the pictures right. And if they're not being listened to, if they're not being treated with respect, if they're not in the room, and it feels to me on this one as though the intellects, the gurus, were all thinking about, you know, the next week and what the priorities were. Nobody was listening to the person saying, do you know, the photo without the Prime Minister will look absolutely terrible. And there's something gone wrong in how they're running this campaign.
It's just so disrespectful.
Yeah,
that was disrespectful to the veterans, disrespectful to the other world leaders. Why wouldn't the British Prime Minister want to be on that French beach to mark such a poignant occasion?
The
last time those veterans
all those others, Susanna.
Yeah.
People could say, oh, it's just the media making something.
Totally right.
No.
And it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
The rain doesn't look good.
You
with
can't
the
help
Titanic.
what you're standing in front of when a photograph is taken with the exit sign. But I think you point at the gurus and at the advisors. I think the biggest issue here is it speaks of the Prime Minister's judgment.
The lack of his instinct.
Because
where's his instinct?
You would imagine, any one of us thinking about it, would we stay at the D-Day commemorations for the international event?
I wouldn't want to leave
alongside those people who had served.
No. I'd have loved to have been invited.
Or would we leave early? And if you just asked that one question, no one is leaving early.
You are right, but they thought they had been there for the British ceremony.
Yeah.
And I think they didn't know the president was going to come. But then, of course, if you go back to the 1940s, there was this big question about whether America would come and join the war.
Yeah.
And in the end, they did. It was so important. You would think, as the British Prime Minister, being next to the American president on D-Day is absolutely the most important.
An important image for every newspaper, every TV, radio, important image.
And especially given what might happen in America in the presidential election this autumn.
The Americans arrived late at the war. The British Prime Minister left early. Why couldn't he have done the manifesto later that evening? Why couldn't he have done it the following morning? I'm sorry, you can't move the D-Day commemoration. It's always the 6th of June, and it is the 80th.
And it's the last one.
Maybe none of them around. It was
so poignant.
David Cameron had said at the 70th anniversary commemorations, it was one of the most moving events he'd ever been to. Tim Shipman at the Sunday Times also points out Buckingham Palace were furious.
There must have been.
Because courtiers pointed out that the king, who was being treated for cancer, was advised not to travel, but was determined to do so despite being in pain. Those are Tim Shipman's words.
Yeah.
An absolutely extraordinary decision. Nobody can understand it. People are saying if you're trying to explain it away, then you're already losing. And not only has he lost a number of that generation's respect, people who, that wartime generation, which is, an absolute... They're the sort of banked generation for the Conservatives, aren't they? I know that a huge number of people...
The grey vote.
But younger people who said, hang on a moment, a couple of weeks ago you told us we had to do a year of national service. A year! You've got 18-year-olds being told, you feckless youth, you don't have a commitment to this country, there's not enough unity or patriotism, you need to do a year of national service. And they're all going, sorry, you couldn't last a day.
Yeah, well...
and we're supposed to do a year.
I can't do my national service, I've got to go and sign off a manifesto. You have to give me a free pass, I'm off. No, look, I don't like Farage from the hard right saying he isn't patriotic, doesn't understand culture, because you know what he means about that because of the colour of Sunak's skin. I do not go down that road at all. But he is out of touch. And it may be his wealth and his privilege, or it may just be that he is a Prime Minister, he's been in that bunker too long, and he just doesn't understand how other people feel, what their lives are about, what makes them tick, what they care about. And it was respect. And it was all about respect.
So disrespectful.
Yeah, let's just hear Rishi Sunak's apology for what happened.
Having participated in all the British events with British veterans, I returned home before the International Leaders event later in the day. On reflection, that was a mistake, and I apologise. I think it's important, though, given the enormity of the sacrifice made, that we don't politicise this. The focus should rightly be on the veterans.
Can I just say, we don't politicise it. So the man who left the veterans on the beaches to go and sign off a manifesto. You could not have had a more political leaving of the veterans. He says, don't politicise it. But at the time, I was feeling a bit iffy about it. But then the more you found out about why he left, you thought, this is...
Well, he could sign off
It's so interesting, isn't it, how every now and then, especially an election campaign, when there's huge, heightened interest in politics, more people watching the news, you can have a moment which just totally cuts through to the whole public, and everybody's talking about it. And as Kevin said, The question is, what does it in people's minds, what does it in the end say? What is the key thing which people feel about it? And as you say, it's disrespect.
It was so moving to watch and listen to it on television or listen to it on the radio. It was so moving. I met some of those veterans a few weeks ago. So humbling. It was a humbling experience because they're so modest and they were. It was heroic what they did and we can't comprehend what they saw, what they went through. Yeah. And to not stick it out for a few more hours.
They're also, and you're right, I mean, it was absolutely heroic and I could not imagine doing what they did, but they're kind of very relatable because they were ordinary people,
they were
called up, served
lads.
their country, beat the Nazis, and they did extraordinary things, but they were working in factories. They were working in offices and they get called up and all of a sudden you're in that landing craft going across.
And what can you do now? If you are Rishi Sunak, what can you do to turn this around?
There's nothing. Its damage is done.
Yeah,
it will be, when we write his legacy, his epitaph, it will be right there on the top.
You would have to now hope your opponent, your main opponent, Keir Starmer and Labour, do something equally catastrophic.